The morning sun cast a gentle, honeyed glow over the Bukchon Hanok village, its warm rays filtering through the delicate paper of a sliding door. Inside, the air was sweet with the scent of honey, ginger, and roasting rice. This was Dalbo, a traditional tea house that felt like a preserved whisper of old Seoul. Han Ji-eun, 27 and fueled by an optimism that defied her dwindling bank account, moved with practiced grace. Her hands, dusted with flour, expertly kneaded a vibrant green dough, infusing it with mugwort. She hummed a soft, nameless tune, a melody that had lived in her head for as long as she could remember, her only inheritance from a mother she barely knew. Dalbo was her world. It was the polished wooden floors she slid across in her socks, the faint scent of her grandfather's herbal medicines clinging to the air, and the quiet dignity of serving teas that told stories. But Dalbo was also failing. The world outside buzzed with trendy espresso bars and minimalist cafes. Tradition, she was learning, didn't pay the bills. Her grandfather, whose stoic presence was the tea house's very foundation, now spent more time at the hospital than behind the counter, his quiet sighs heavier than any spoken word of worry. Every customer was a small victory, every empty seat a looming threat. "Another notice," her best friend, Bora, said, waving a stark white envelope as she walked in, her trendy clothes a stark contrast to the tea house's rustic charm. "Final warning this time, Ji-eun. The bank isn't going to accept your positive energy as a payment method." Ji-eun wiped her hands on her apron, forcing a smile. "It's fine. We just need a little boost. One good investor, one viral post. Maybe a celebrity will wander in and fall in love with my yakwa." She held up a glistening honey cookie, a perfect flower-shaped confection. Bora just sighed, her concern etching lines on her forehead. "You can't keep this place alive with just cookies and hope." Meanwhile, across the city, in a steel and glass tower that pierced the sky, Kwon Do-yoon, 32, existed in a world of sharp angles and monochrome palettes. He was a star architect, a prodigy whose name was synonymous with innovative, soullessly beautiful structures. His office was a testament to his philosophy, pristine, silent, and devoid of personal touches, save for a single withered succulent on his vast desk, a gift he'd never had the heart to throw away. He commanded his team with clipped, precise language, his face a mask of detached professionalism. But behind the cold facade, Do-yoon was haunted. He suffered from a peculiar form of amnesia, a block of time from his childhood, from age 10 to 11, completely erased after a traumatic car accident that had claimed his parents. The past was a locked door, and the silence it left behind echoed in his empty penthouse and his even emptier relationships. His only link to a world outside his work was his overbearing grandmother, the formidable chairwoman of Taeyang Construction. She had one mission: to see Do-yoon married and settled, securing the family dynasty. Her latest scheme was a blind date with the daughter of a business associate, a woman as polished and uninteresting as the lobby of his building. Their first encounter was, by K-drama standards, a meat disaster. Ji-eun was making a special delivery of custom-made rice cakes for a VIP client, an order she hoped would lead to more corporate business. She navigated the gleaming lobby of Do-yoon's firm, a large, ornate box in her arms, feeling like a country mouse in a palace of cats. As she rounded a corner, deep in thought about whether she'd added enough jujube dates, she collided with a wall of expensive wool. The box went flying, an intricate mosaic of pink, green, and white rice cakes, each one painstakingly crafted, splattered across the pristine marble floor and across the front of Kwon Do-yoon's immaculate, custom-tailored suit. He looked down at the sticky, colorful mess on his chest, then at her, his eyes cold and sharp. Not a flicker of surprise, just pure, unadulterated annoyance. "Are you blind?" he asked, his voice low and dangerously calm. Ji-eun's face burned with humiliation. "I'm so sorry. I wasn't looking." She bowed frantically, her hands fluttering uselessly. "I'll pay for the cleaning. I'll pay for everything." "Don't bother," he said, already shrugging off his jacket and handing it to his bewildered assistant. He didn't give her a second glance as he walked away, leaving her standing amidst the ruins of her hard work and hopes. The dismissal stung more than any angry outburst could have. To him, she was less than a nuisance. She was nothing. She was just part of the mess to be cleaned up. That night, as she scrubbed the last of the sticky rice from the delivery box, the nameless melody she always hummed felt a little more melancholic. She felt the crushing weight of her reality. Hope, she feared, wasn't going to be enough. Do-yoon, for his part, forgot the incident the moment he stepped into his next meeting. A clumsy girl, a ruined suit, it was an insignificant variable in a day of complex equations. Yet, later that night, as he tried to sleep in his silent, sterile apartment, a strange thing happened. For a fleeting moment, he thought he smelled something sweet, like honey and ginger. And for a reason he couldn't comprehend, the phantom scent made the ever-present knot of anxiety in his chest loosen, just for a second, before tightening again. The teahouse, Dalbo, sat on a prime piece of real estate, a fact that had not gone unnoticed by developers. Taeyang Construction, Do-yoon's family company, had been trying to acquire the entire block for a new luxury commercial complex. The only holdout was a stubborn little teahouse. Do-yoon had been tasked by his grandmother to handle the final negotiations. It was a trivial task, beneath him, but she was insistent. "Show them the face of the future," she'd said. When he arrived at Dalbo, he was unimpressed by its quaint, old-fashioned charm. He saw inefficiency, not history. He saw wasted space, not character. He stepped inside, the small bell above the door announcing his unwelcome presence. And then he saw her, the clumsy girl from his lobby, now standing behind the counter, her face pale with shock. Ji-eun felt the air leave her lungs. It was him, the cold, handsome man in the expensive suit, her nemesis. And now he was here, in her sanctuary, looking at her teahouse with the same disdain he had shown her. "You," they said in unison, one with accusation, the other with icy indifference. He slid a business card across the wooden counter. It landed with a soft, final thud. "Kwon Do-yoon, lead architect at Taeyang Construction. We've made a generous offer for this property. I'm here to ensure you accept it." Ji-eun stared at the name, then back at his unfeeling face. This man wasn't just an arrogant jerk who'd ruined her day. He was the man trying to bulldoze her life. He was the embodiment of everything that threatened her world. The cold, heartless future coming to pave over her warm, cherished past. She lifted her chin, a spark of defiance in her eyes. "This teahouse is not for sale." He raised an eyebrow, a ghost of a smirk playing on his lips. "Everything has a price. Your sentimentality isn't factored into the property value." The battle lines were drawn. The stage was set. In this quiet teahouse, filled with the ghosts of the past and the scent of brewing tea, two worlds had collided. A world of warm, handmade traditions and a world of cold, calculated ambition. Neither Ji-eun nor Do-yoon could possibly know that their lives were already connected by more than just a real estate dispute. They were linked by a shared, forgotten past, by a promise whispered years ago, and by a simple, nameless melody that was about to find its voice. The Kai, the introduction to their story, was complete. The normal, fragile world had been established. just before the first real tremor was about to shake its foundations. The standoff over Dalbo became the unlikely thread that wove Han Ji-eun and Kwon Do-yoon's lives together. Do-yoon, ever the pragmatist, saw her refusal as an illogical, emotional outburst. He visited the teahouse daily, a striking, disruptive figure in his sharp suits, armed with blueprints and revised offers. Each visit was a small war. He'd talk about structural integrity and zoning laws. She'd counter by offering him a cup of sanghwacha, a dark, bitter medicinal tea. To help with your cold heart, she'd say, her smile deceptively sweet. He never drank it, but he never stopped coming. It was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Why would anyone choose this quaint poverty over a life-changing sum of money? He started observing her. He watched her greet elderly customers by name, her voice warm and genuine. He saw the gentle way she cared for her ailing grandfather. He noticed the way she hummed that strange, simple tune when she thought no one was listening. It was an oddly familiar melody that he couldn't place, but it snagged at the edges of his walled-off memory, a soft burr on a smooth surface. The true complication, however, arrived in the form of Do-yoon's grandmother, chairwoman Kwon. Frustrated with his lack of progress on the Dalbo acquisition and his continued refusal to marry, she issued an ultimatum. She had arranged a formal engagement dinner with the chaebol heiress Kang So-hee. If Do-yoon didn't show up with a suitable partner, or at least a convincing reason to end this arrangement, she would personally oversee the demolition of Dalbo and cut him off from a critical passion project he was designing. It was blackmail, pure and simple. Panicked and cornered, Do-yoon's analytical mind raced through impossible scenarios. That's when his gaze fell upon a delivery of rice cakes arriving at his office. Dalbo's logo was on the box. An idea, as desperate as it was insane, began to form. He drove to the tea house that evening, finding Ji-eun alone, tallying her losses for the day. He placed a contract on the counter. It wasn't a real estate offer. It was a relationship proposal. "I need a fiancé," he stated without preamble, "a fake one, for 3 months." Ji-eun stared at him as if he'd grown a second head. "Have you been drinking something stronger than tea, Mr. Kwon?" "It's a business proposition," he continued, his tone clipped and professional. "You pretend to be my devoted fiancé. In return, Taeyong Construction will cease all attempts to acquire this property for 1 year. And," he added, pushing a check across the counter, "I will personally cover your grandfather's hospital bills for that period." It was a deal with the devil, a devil who wore designer suits and had the emotional range of a teaspoon. Her pride screamed no. It was absurd, humiliating. But then she looked at the faded photograph of her parents on the wall, at the pile of unpaid bills, at the medicine reminder for her grandfather on her phone. Her hope was running on fumes, and he was offering a full tank of gas. The choice was agonizing, but it wasn't really a choice at all. "Fine," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "but there are rules. No touching, no personal questions, and you have to drink the tea I serve you." He agreed, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. The development of their strange story had begun. Their fake relationship was a masterclass in awkwardness. He had to teach her how to fit into his world of sterile luxury, a process filled with comical missteps. He took her shopping, his face a mask of weary resignation as she marveled at price tags. "This dress costs more than my tea house's monthly revenue," she'd whisper loudly, earning glares from the staff. He tried to give her a crash course on his family history and business associates, which she promptly forgot, instead giving them nicknames based on their facial expressions. In return, she forced him into her world. She made him sit through tea ceremonies, explaining the subtle differences between Ujan and Sejak green tea while he looked at his watch. She dragged him to the local market to haggle over the price of radishes, a mortifying experience for a man who never carried cash. They bickered constantly. He was rigid, she was spontaneous. He was silence, she was noise. He was logic, she was emotion. Yet beneath the friction, something was shifting. He started to see the steel beneath her sunny exterior. He saw the fierce love she had for her grandfather, the quiet dignity with which she ran her business against all odds. She wasn't just a clumsy girl, she was resilient. And she, in turn, began to glimpse the cracks in his perfect armor. She noticed the way he'd flinch at the sound of screeching tires, the haunted look in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. She saw that his coldness wasn't cruelty, it was a shield. The turning point came during the dreaded engagement dinner with chairwoman Kwon and the Kang family. Ji-eun, clad in a ridiculously expensive dress Do-yoon had bought her, was a nervous wreck. Chairwoman Kwon looked at her with undisguised contempt. So-hee, the prospective fiancé, was polite but dismissive. "So," the chairwoman began, her voice dripping with condescension, "what is it exactly that you do, Miss Han?" "I run a traditional tea house," Ji-eun said, lifting her chin. So-hee's father chuckled. "How quaint, a hobby." "It's not a hobby," Ji-eun retorted, her voice steady. "It's a legacy. It's about preserving something beautiful in a world that only values what's new." Do-yoon, who had been silent, suddenly spoke. "Dalbo is a perfect example of wabi-sabi architecture. It finds beauty in imperfection and values authenticity over polish. It's a concept modern design has forgotten." He looked directly at Ji-eun, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of genuine warmth in his eyes, a silent, unexpected defense. Later that night, as he drove her home, the air in the car was thick with unspoken words. He pulled up in front of the tea house. "You did well," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "You too," she replied, her heart doing a strange little flutter. "For a robot?" He almost smiled, almost. As she turned to leave, he reached out, his hand gently closing around her wrist, the first breach of their no-touching rule. "Ji-eun," he said, using her first name. "Thank you." The touch was brief, but it sent a jolt through both of them. It was a moment of vulnerability, a crack in the contract, and it was leading them somewhere neither had anticipated. The climax of the sing phase, the emotional milestone the audience craves, arrived a week later. It was the 8th week of their contract. They had successfully fooled his grandmother for now, and a fragile, tentative truce had formed between them. He found himself visiting the tea house even when he didn't have to, sitting in a quiet corner with a laptop, the scent of her teas a comforting presence. One rainy evening, she found him there long after closing time, staring blankly at his screen. The air was heavy, the sound of rain a soothing drumbeat on the roof tiles. He looked lost. The formidable architect was gone, replaced by a man drowning in a silent sea. "Rough day?" she asked softly, placing a cup of steaming jujube tea in front of him. "It's sweet, good for calming the mind." He looked up, his eyes dark with a pain she couldn't decipher. "I had another memory test today," he confessed, the words seemingly pulled from him. They tried a new hypnosis technique to unlock the block. It didn't work. It never works. It just feels like slamming against a brick wall in my own mind. It was the most he'd ever shared about his past. She sat down opposite him, her earlier annoyance at his existence completely gone, replaced by a wave of empathy. "Maybe some doors are meant to stay closed for a reason," she said gently. "But what if the key is on the other side?" he countered, his voice raw. "What if I can't be a whole person until I open it?" He looked at her, his gaze intense. "How do you do it? How do you face every day with so much light when everything around you is falling apart?" "Because I have to," she whispered. "For my grandfather, for Dalbo, and because I have this." She started humming, her voice barely audible over the rain. The nameless, familiar melody filled the quiet space. Do-yoon froze. His head snapped up, his eyes wide with a strange, dawning recognition. The melody, that was the tune that haunted the edges of his consciousness. "Where did you learn that song?" he asked, his voice urgent. "I don't know," she said, surprised by his intensity. "I've just always known it." He stood up and walked towards her, his movements slow, deliberate. He stopped just inches from her, his tall frame casting a shadow over her. The air crackled. The carefully constructed walls of their contract, their bickering, their separate worlds, they all crumbled in that moment. He saw her, really saw her, not as a means to an end, but as a source of that inexplicable light. And she saw the deep, profound loneliness in his eyes. "Do-yoon?" she breathed, her heart pounding. He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned down and gently, hesitantly pressed his lips to hers. It wasn't a passionate, demanding kiss. It was a question. It was a moment of shared silence, a desperate search for an answer in a world of noise. It was tender and full of a longing neither of them understood. The taste of sweet jujube tea lingered between them. The first kiss. The point of no return. Their fake relationship had just become terrifyingly, irrevocably real. But as they stood there, wrapped in the sound of the rain and a forgotten melody, they had no idea that this kiss wasn't the beginning of a simple love story. It was the unlocking of a door to a past far more tragic and intertwined than they could ever imagine. The kiss changed everything. The carefully drawn lines of their contract blurred into soft, indistinct smudges. The bickering didn't stop entirely, but now it was laced with an underlying tenderness, a new awareness that hummed between them like a live wire. Awkward touches became less accidental. Shared glances lingered a moment too long. Do-yoon found himself smiling, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes, when Ji-eun successfully duped his grandmother with an elaborate, fabricated story about their romantic weekend getaway. Ji-eun, in turn, felt a protective instinct bloom in her chest whenever she saw the flicker of pain in his eyes. They were falling into a rhythm that felt dangerously like love. The Sung phase of their story seemed to be progressing along a predictable, heartwarming path. They were in the lovey-dovey stage, navigating the external conflict of his family while their internal feelings grew deeper. They shared late-night meals of instant noodles in the quiet teahouse after closing, his expensive suit jacket draped over a chair next to her flour-dusted apron. He helped her fix a leaky pipe. She organized the chaotic files on his laptop. They were building a small, fragile world for just the two of them. The audience would be settled in, enjoying the slow-burn romance, anticipating the next sweet moment. And that is precisely when the jun, the twist, arrives. It doesn't come from the predictable threat of chairwoman Kwon or a rival suitor. It comes from a place neither of them could have ever foreseen. Ji-eun's grandfather's health took a sudden turn for the worse. One evening, while rushing him to the hospital, an old, dusty box of his belongings fell from a high shelf in his closet. Inside, beneath faded photos and old letters, was a small, worn, leather-bound journal. It was her mother's diary. Ji-eun had never seen it before. Her grandfather had always been painfully silent about her mother, who had died when Ji-eun was just a child. His grief was a locked room she'd never dared to enter. With trembling hands, Ji-eun opened the journal. Her mother's elegant script filled the pages, telling a story of a gentle, hopeful young woman. She wrote about opening Dalbo with Ji-eun's father, her love for tea, and her dreams for her baby daughter. But as Ji-eun read on, the entries grew more anxious. Her mother wrote about a new friendship with another young mother she'd met at a local park, a woman named Oh Sukcha. She wrote about their children, her little Ji-eun, and Sukcha's quiet, serious son, Do-yoon. They were inseparable, she wrote, best friends. Ji-eun's blood ran cold. Do-yoon? It had to be a coincidence. But her mother described the boy in vivid detail: his serious eyes, his quiet nature, his fierce loyalty to her daughter. She even wrote about a silly little song she'd made up for them, a simple melody they would hum together for hours. The melody, their melody. The diary entries took a darker turn. Ji-eun's mother wrote of her growing concern for her friend. Suk-ja's husband, a kind but ambitious man, had gotten involved in a risky construction project with a powerful company, Taeyang Construction. He had discovered something, an unforgivable shortcuts in the structural plans for a new department store they were building. He was planning to become a whistleblower. Suk-ja was terrified, convinced that the company would ruin them. The final entry was dated the day before the accident. Suk-ja called, panicked. She said her husband is meeting with the chairman of Taeyang tonight to give him one last chance to fix things. She's scared. She asked if she and Do-yoon could come with us on our trip to Busan tomorrow, just to get away. I told her, of course. We'll pick them up in the morning. I feel like something terrible is about to happen. Ji-eun dropped the diary. Her mind reeled, struggling to connect the pieces. The car accident, her mother's death, Do-yoon's amnesia, his parents' death. It wasn't two separate tragedies. It was one. They were all in the same car. The trip to Busan. Her parents were going to pick them up. The unforgivable shortcuts. Taeyang Construction. Do-yoon's grandmother. This revelation recontextualized everything. Their meeting wasn't a coincidence. Their animosity, the fight over Dalbo, their fake relationship, it was all a grotesque farce playing out on the stage of a shared, buried tragedy. The story was no longer a light romantic comedy about a rich man and a poor girl. It was now a dark, suspenseful thriller about family secrets, corporate corruption, and two people whose lives were irrevocably shattered by the same event, orchestrated by the very family he was trying to protect. Do-yoon's coldness was no longer an arrogant trait. It was a symptom of a trauma she now shared. His grandmother's obsession with securing the family legacy wasn't just ambition, it was a desperate, ruthless attempt to bury the past. And their budding romance? What was it now? Was it built on a lie? Or was it a cosmic, tragic pull towards the only other person on Earth who could possibly understand the void in his soul? The twist was not a confrontation. It was the silent, devastating impact of new information. The tension didn't come from a villain's evil plan being revealed, but from Ji-eun's quiet, horrified discovery in a dusty old room. The entire first half of the story, the key and the sung, was instantly transformed. The cute bickering over tea now seemed like a hollow echo over a mass grave of secrets. The kiss that had felt like a beginning now felt like a betrayal, a profanity on the memory of their parents. Ji-eun felt sick. How could she look at him now? How could she see the man she was starting to love, and not the boy whose family may have been responsible for destroying hers? Every kind gesture he'd ever made, every glimpse of vulnerability, was now tainted by the shadow of this grandmother, the woman who had likely silenced her father-in-law, and, in doing so, caused the death of 4 people. She closed the diary, her hands shaking. The warm, comforting tea house suddenly felt like a cage, its walls inscribed with a history she never knew. She looked out the window, at the city lights twinkling obliviously. Out there, Do-yoon was living his life, completely unaware that the key to the locked door in his mind was not on the other side, but right here, in her hands, written in the fading ink of a dead woman's diary. The melody she hummed was not just a nameless tune, it was a requiem. The John had detonated, and the fallout would be catastrophic, transforming their romantic comedy into a heartbreaking melodrama and forcing them to confront a truth far more painful than any fake breakup ever could. The aftermath of the revelation was a suffocating silence. Ji-eun could no longer look at Do-yoon without seeing the ghosts of their parents standing between them. The light-hearted banter died on her lips, replaced by a profound, sorrowful weight. She became distant, her sunny optimism clouded over. Do-yoon, perceptive in his own analytical way, noticed the change immediately. He mistook her withdrawal for regret over their deepening feelings, a fear of their different worlds finally crashing down. He thought it was about the money, the status, the impossibility of it all. The irony was devastating. He tried to bridge the gap. He'd bring her expensive gifts, thinking he could solve the problem with money, the only tool he'd ever been taught to use. He'd plan elaborate dates, trying to recapture the fragile magic they'd found. But each gesture felt like a fresh stab of betrayal to Ji-eun. How could he buy her flowers when his family's money was stained with the blood of hers? The gyeol, the final act, began not with a dramatic confrontation, but with the slow, agonizing disintegration of their bond, poisoned by a truth only one of them knew. The breaking point came when chairwoman Kwon, pleased with their stable relationship, announced her intention to formally welcome Ji-eun to the family with a dinner and a gift, the deed to the Dalbo property, free and clear. A small token, the chairwoman had said to Do-yoon, to show that we value her. Now the legacy is secure. That night, Ji-eun met Do-yoon at the teahouse. She placed the leather-bound diary on the table between them. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice hollow. "If this is about my grandmother, I can handle her," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "I told you I would protect you." "Protect me?" A bitter, broken laugh escaped her. "You can't. The person I need protection from is you. Your name, your family." She pushed the diary towards him. Confused, he opened the journal. He began to read, his brow furrowed at first, then his posture stiffening with every page. He read about the two young mothers, the inseparable children, the shared melody. He read about the whistleblower plot, the threat from Taeyong Construction, and then he read the final, fateful entry. The pieces of his shattered memory began to violently slam into place. The smell of rain on asphalt, the sound of his mother screaming his name, the crushing sound of metal, the face of a kind woman in the driver's seat humming a familiar tune. The locked door in his mind didn't just open, it was blown off its hinges, and the flood of trauma and memory knocked the air from his lungs. He looked up at Ji-eun, his face ashen, his eyes wide with a horror that mirrored her own. "It was you," he whispered, "the little girl in the park." The truth was a chasm that opened between them, vast and seemingly uncrossable. The story of rich boy, poor girl was reconciled with the shocking twist, creating a new, terrible harmony. The confrontation that followed was not between them, but between Do-yoon and his grandmother. He stormed into her opulent office, the diary in his hand, his carefully constructed world in ruins. He wasn't the cold, detached architect anymore. He was the 10-year-old boy who had lost everything, finally awake. The chairwoman, for the first time in her life, looked shaken. She didn't deny it. Her son, Do-yoon's father, had been the one driving the project. The whistleblower, Ji-eun's father-in-law from her mother's diary, threatened to expose the dangerous cost-cutting measures. The chairman, her late husband, had arranged a meeting, but things went wrong. There was a struggle, a tragic accident. The cover-up wasn't just to protect the company, it was to protect the memory of her own son, whom she portrayed as a victim, not a perpetrator of corporate negligence. "Everything I did," she pleaded, her voice cracking, "I did for you, Do-yoon, to preserve your future." "You didn't preserve it," he said, his voice dead. "You buried it. You buried me with it." He walked away, leaving the empire she had ruthlessly protected to crumble around her. The fallout was immense. An anonymous tip from Do-yoon led to a full-scale investigation into the old construction project. The ghosts of the past were finally given a voice. The story of Taeyong's corruption became a national scandal. Chairwoman Kwon was forced to step down, and the company faced ruin. It was a public reckoning. But the private one was harder. Do-yoon and Ji-eun were nacked in the rubble. He disappeared for a time, overwhelmed by guilt and a lifetime of unearthed grief. Ji-eun, meanwhile, stayed at Dalbo, which now felt more like a memorial than a home. She finally had the conversation with her grandfather that they should have had years ago. He wept, confessing that he'd hidden the diary to protect her from the pain, a classic case of noble idiocy that had only prolonged the suffering. The subplots were tied up. Bora provided steadfast support, a rock in Ji-eun's storm. Do-yoon's loyal assistant, guilt-ridden for his own willful ignorance, was the one who helped leak the incriminating documents. The final episode, the extended epilogue, takes place a year later. Dalbo is thriving. After the scandal, it became a symbol of resilience, of tradition withstanding corrupt modernity. Ji-eun is no longer just surviving. She is a guardian of a legacy, her own and her mother's. She's stronger, her optimism now tempered with a quiet wisdom. One crisp autumn afternoon, the bell above the teahouse door jingles. It's Do-yoon. He looks different. The expensive suits are gone, replaced by simple, comfortable clothes. The haunted look in his eyes has been replaced by a deep, settled sadness, but also a sliver of peace. He's been away, working with a trauma support group, helping other victims of corporate negligence. He's been trying to atone. He doesn't ask for forgiveness. He just orders a cup of tea. She serves him the bitter Sanghwa cha. This time, he drinks it. He drinks every last drop. "I found this," he says, placing a small, old, slightly crumpled photograph on the counter. It's a picture of two small children in a park. A serious-looking little boy is holding hands with a smiling little girl with pigtails. "I think it belongs to you, or maybe to us." Ji-eun looks at the photo, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. It's a memory neither of them truly had, but one they both felt. The resolution isn't a grand, passionate reunion. It's quiet, hesitant, and fragile. It reconciles the dissonant tones of their story, the light comedy of their contract, the dark tragedy of their past, and the bittersweet hope of their future. "The melody," she says softly, "I remember now. My mother used to sing it when we were afraid of the dark." He nods, his own eyes glistening. "My mother, too." He doesn't promise her a happy ending. He doesn't offer to fix everything. He just stands there, offering his broken, healing self. The final shot is not of a kiss, but of their hands, almost touching, hovering over the old photograph on the polished wooden counter of Dalbo. The ending is not a perfect circle, but two broken halves finding a way to fit together, creating a new, scarred but whole harmony. It's a gyol that is emotionally resonant and deeply earned, a testament to the enduring power of love to find its way not around tragedy, but directly through it, offering not a fairy tale, but something far more real and beautiful, a chance to begin again.